There was a time when an American luxury car could stretch more than 20 feet, weigh nearly 3 tons, and still be advertised as the smart choice for a successful family. The longer the hood, the wider the chrome bumper, the thicker the vinyl roof, the better. These were cars with opera windows, pillow-soft seats, hidden headlights, and trunks big enough to swallow vacation luggage for a week. Cadillacs, Lincolns, Buicks, and Imperials were not just transportation. They were rolling declarations that space, power, and gasoline were things America had in unlimited supply. If you enjoy classic car history, subscribe now, because this story explains one of the strangest chapters in Detroit design. So why did buyers chase machines this huge, and why did that dream collapse so fast? To understand that, we have to look at the moment when bigger was not a problem. Bigger was the selling point. After World War II, the United States entered a rare moment when millions of families suddenly had more money, more space, and more confidence than before. Wartime factories had been converted back to civilian production. Wages were rising. Veterans came home with access to education, mortgages, and steady jobs. For the first time, a large part of the middle class could imagine buying a new house, filling it with appliances, and parking a brand new car in the driveway. That driveway mattered. Suburbs spread quickly outside major cities, and daily life moved farther apart. The grocery store, the school, the office, and the family vacation were no longer centered around a dense city neighborhood. A car was not just useful, it became the machine that connected the whole new lifestyle. At the same time, American roads were changing. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 helped build the interstate highway system, creating long, fast routes between cities and states. On those open roads, a big car made sense to many buyers. A long wheelbase smoothed out rough pavement. A heavy body felt stable at speed. A large engine made passing easy. With gasoline cheap and widely available, fuel economy did not dominate the conversation the way it would later. Detroit understood this perfectly. Automakers sold size as comfort, strength, and progress. A wide cabin meant room for 6 passengers. A huge trunk meant the family could travel without packing carefully. Power steering, automatic transmissions, and powerful V8 engines made these enormous cars feel easy to drive, not difficult. Size also carried social meaning. In the post-war years, a bigger car told neighbors that a family had made it. It suggested a good job, a new home, and a secure place in the growing middle class. Chrome, length, and presence became public signals of success, parked right in front of the house for everyone to see. By the 1960s and early 1970s, the biggest American cars were no longer just transportation for long roads and large families. They had become private lounges on wheels. And the next part of the story is what happened when automakers turned all that size into softness, silence, and luxury. Inside these cars, the goal was to make the road disappear. Engineers used soft springs, long suspension travel, and heavy sound insulation to separate passengers from bumps, wind, and engine noise. The cabin was not meant to feel mechanical. It was meant to feel calm. The front seat was often a wide bench, shaped more like a sofa than a bucket seat. 3 adults could sit across it, with no center console taking up space. Thick carpeting covered the floor. Padded dashboards softened the interior. Door panels, headliners, and seats were trimmed with luxury fabrics, vinyl, or leather, depending on the model and price. Air conditioning became one of the most important comfort features. In a big, closed cabin, especially in southern and western states, cold air turned the car into a private room that could cruise for hours. Add a quiet radio, soft upholstery, and deep seats, and the car became a rolling living room. The driving experience was built around effortlessness. Automatic transmissions removed constant shifting. Power steering made a car over 18 feet long feel manageable in parking lots. Power brakes helped control all that weight. Power windows added another layer of convenience, especially in luxury models where the driver could control the whole cabin from one seat. Massive trunks mattered too. These cars were designed for families, vacations, golf clubs, luggage, spare tires, and anything else an owner might need on a long highway trip. Practicality and luxury were often packaged together because size allowed both. What these cars were not designed to do was corner sharply or save fuel. Their weight, soft suspension, and light steering made them feel best on straight roads at steady speed. They floated, leaned, and glided. That was the point. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, this philosophy had reached its peak, and no brand pushed the idea of comfort, silence, and sheer size further than Cadillac. Cadillac turned that philosophy into metal with the 1976 Fleetwood 75. This was not just a large sedan, it was one of the biggest American production cars of its era, stretching about 252 inches from bumper to bumper. That put it at over 21 feet long, with curb weights often well above 5,000 pounds before passengers climbed in. The 75 was built for formal duty. Cadillac offered it as a limousine and as a 9-passenger sedan, the kind of car used by executives, hotels, funeral homes, government offices, and anyone who needed transportation to look official before the door even opened. Its long wheelbase gave the rear compartment enormous space, with room for jump seats in some versions and enough leg room to make the back seat feel separate from the driver's area. Under the hood was Cadillac's 500 cubic inch V8, one of the largest production passenger car engines ever used in America. By 1976, emissions rules had reduced horsepower compared with earlier years, but the point was not high speed. The engine's job was to move a huge body smoothly, with enough torque to make the car feel calm in traffic and steady on the highway. Cadillac also sold a different kind of giant that year, the Fleetwood 60 Special Brougham. It was shorter than the 75, but only by limousine standards. At nearly 234 inches long, it was still longer than many full-size cars and carried the same message of status in a more owner-driven package. The 60 Special Brougham leaned into trim, texture, and presence. It had a plush cabin, a formal roofline, wide seats, thick carpeting, and heavy use of chrome on the outside. The long hood, upright grille, padded roof treatments, and broad rear quarters made it look expensive at a glance. Performance was secondary. The car was built to arrive with authority, not to attack a corner. Together, these two Cadillacs showed the top end of the old American luxury formula. The 75 represented chauffeur-driven prestige. The 60 Special Brougham represented personal luxury taken to full size. But Cadillac was not the only brand chasing this image. Across Detroit, other automakers wanted their own version of the American luxury giant. Buick took the full-size luxury formula and made it feel less ceremonial. The 1976 Buick Electra 225 was the brand's great cruiser, a car for buyers who wanted size, silence, and prestige without stepping all the way into Cadillac pricing or Cadillac formality. The name itself came from scale. 225 originally referred to a Buick that measured about 225 inches long, and by 1976, the Electra had grown even beyond that. Depending on body style, it stretched to roughly 233 inches, with a long hood, wide body, and the kind of road presence that made compact cars look like background traffic. Inside, the Electra focused on comfort rather than ceremony. It offered broad bench seats, soft suspension tuning, thick trim, power accessories, and the relaxed driving position expected from a premium American sedan. The message was clear. This was a luxury car for an owner-driver, someone who wanted to glide down the interstate in a Buick, not be mistaken for a person arriving in a formal limousine. Lincoln aimed at a different buyer with the 1976 Continental Town Car. This was Ford's dignified answer to Cadillac, and it used every visual cue of old-school American status. The hood was long, the grille was upright, the roofline was formal, and the small opera windows made the rear compartment look private, even when the owner was driving. Under that massive hood was Ford's 460 cubic inch V8, built for smooth torque rather than sharp response. The Continental Town Car was not trying to feel light or athletic. It was meant to feel planted, quiet, and important, with chrome, padded roof trim, and a squared-off profile that turned the whole car into a rolling executive office. Together, the Electra and the Continental showed how broad the land yacht market had become. Buick offered approachable prestige with huge dimensions. Lincoln offered formal luxury for buyers who wanted a Cadillac rival from Ford's side of Detroit. And Chrysler had its own giant waiting in the wings, although today it is far less remembered than either one. Chrysler's giant was the 1974 Imperial Imperial LeBaron, one of the most overlooked luxury cars of the decade. It was built to stand with Cadillac and Lincoln, not below them, and it had the size to make that claim. The LeBaron stretched more than 19 feet long, weighed well over 2 tons, and used Chrysler's 440 cubic inch V8 as its standard source of power. Imperial was not supposed to be a dressed-up Chrysler. For years, it carried its own luxury identity, with formal styling, rich interiors, hidden headlamps, thick sound insulation, and prices that put it in the same conversation as Cadillac Fleetwood and Lincoln Continental buyers. The problem was visibility. Imperial sold in much smaller numbers, and the name never became the same kind of cultural shorthand for success that Cadillac had already become. That makes the 1974 LeBaron rare today, but it also explains why it faded from public memory. It was a serious luxury car from a company better known for engineering and performance, and it arrived in a market where prestige depended as much on image as on equipment. Cadillac and Lincoln owned the public imagination. Imperial had the substance, but not the same spotlight. Cadillac's 1974 Eldorado took a different path. It was not a formal sedan, but a huge front-wheel drive personal luxury coupe with a hood that seemed to run forever. Sharp fender lines, an imposing grille, and styling meant to be noticed from half a block away. Under the hood was Cadillac's 500 cubic inch V8, one of the largest engines ever placed in a regular American production car. The Eldorado proved that excess did not have to look conservative. It was massive, expensive, and technically unusual, yet it sold as a statement piece for buyers who wanted glamour more than restraint. Together, the Imperial LeBaron and Cadillac Eldorado show how wide American luxury had become by the mid-1970s. These cars were not just transportation. They were rolling declarations of status, confidence, and an era when bigger still meant better. By the 1960s and early 1970s, a big American car was not just parked at the curb. It was part of the scenery of success. You saw it in suburban driveways beside split-level houses, lined up outside country clubs, idling in front of downtown office towers, and pulling into roadside motels after a 500-mile day on the highway. Size fit the way America was living. Families were spreading into suburbs. Vacations meant long interstate trips with children in the back seat, luggage in the trunk, and air conditioning blowing across a wide bench seat. A longer car felt smoother, quieter, and more protective. Heavy doors, broad hoods, and tall grilles suggested safety before crash ratings became part of everyday conversation. These cars also carried authority. Executives arrived in long black sedans. Salesmen crossed states in full-size coupes. Police departments, funeral homes, politicians, and hotel fleets all used big domestic cars, which gave them a public image of command. If a compact car looked practical, a long Cadillac, Lincoln, Buick, Chrysler, or Oldsmobile looked established. The styling made that message impossible to miss. Chrome bumpers flashed under streetlights. Hood ornaments stood like small emblems of rank. Vinyl roofs gave ordinary sedans a formal look. Wide bodies, long rear decks, opera windows, hidden headlamps, and upright grilles turned length into a visible sign of prestige. Cheap fuel made the formula seem permanent. Gasoline was treated as a background expense, not a deciding factor. Automakers could sell comfort, silence, power, and presence without asking buyers to think too hard about miles per gallon. That was the world these land yachts were built for. Broad roads, growing suburbs, rising incomes, and confidence that bigger meant better. But the same traits that made them desirable were about to become problems. Weight, length, thirst, and excess would soon be judged by a different standard. The bill for driving a land yacht showed up in small, daily inconveniences first. A full-size sedan or personal luxury coupe could stretch well past 18 feet, and some luxury models pushed close to 19. In a suburban driveway, that looked impressive. In a downtown parking space, it became a geometry problem. Drivers had to swing wide into turns, back up more than once, and judge long hoods and hidden rear corners with very little help from the mirrors of the time. City streets exposed the compromise even more. Parallel parking a big Cadillac, Lincoln, Chrysler, or Buick required space that smaller cars could use easily. Narrow lanes, tight gas stations, crowded shopping centers, and old parking garages made length and width feel less like comfort and more like work. The heavy steering systems helped, but the mass was still there. These cars did not change direction quickly, and emergency maneuvers demanded patience, distance, and room. Then there was fuel. Many of these cars used enormous V8 engines, often 400, 450, or even 500 cubic inches. When gasoline was cheap, low fuel economy was accepted as part of the package. Once prices began to rise, single-digit miles per gallon in city driving turned a symbol of success into a weekly expense that owners could not ignore. The engines also became less impressive than their size suggested. In the early 1970s, emissions equipment, lower compression ratios, and new tuning priorities reduced power. At the same time, the industry shifted from gross horsepower ratings, measured under ideal conditions, to net horsepower ratings, measured with real accessories and exhaust systems attached. The numbers suddenly looked much smaller, and in many cases the driving experience was softer too. So a car could have a huge engine, massive weight, and modest acceleration all at once. It still rode smoothly, and it still looked important, but the old formula was weakening. For years, cheap gasoline had hidden the weakness. In 1973, an external shock would expose it completely. In October 1973, the oil embargo turned fuel from an afterthought into a national problem. Lines formed at gas stations, some stations ran out, and prices climbed quickly enough that ordinary buyers began calculating what a big car cost every week, not just what it cost on the showroom floor. That shock arrived while Washington was already tightening the rules. The Clean Air Act pushed automakers to reduce exhaust emissions, and by the mid-1970s, catalytic converters and unleaded gasoline were becoming part of the new reality. In 1975, the federal government also created corporate average fuel economy standards, which forced manufacturers to think about mileage across their entire fleets. For Detroit, that was a direct challenge to the full-size formula. A 20-foot luxury car with thick bumpers, heavy sound insulation, and a massive V8 engine was difficult to justify when regulators wanted cleaner exhaust and better fuel economy. Buyers were changing too. The prestige of length and chrome still mattered, but practicality now had a stronger voice. People asked how often the car needed fuel, how much it cost to insure, and whether it made sense for commuting. The mid-1970s giants became the last pure expression of that older world. Cadillacs, Lincolns, large Buicks, and the final Imperial models still carried the long hoods, wide bodies, soft suspensions, and formal styling that had defined American luxury for decades. They looked like flagships, but they were built at the exact moment the market was turning against their size. General Motors moved first in a serious way. For 1977, its full-size cars were redesigned to be shorter, narrower, and hundreds of pounds lighter, while still offering similar interior room. Cadillac, Chevrolet, Buick, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac all became proof that a big American car no longer had to be as physically enormous as before. Ford followed with smaller full-size models for 1979. Chrysler, weakened financially, moved away from the old Imperial-style excess and struggled to compete on the same scale. By the end of the decade, the true giants were no longer the future of American motoring. They had become the final chapter of an era built on cheap gasoline, relaxed rules, and the belief that bigger automatically meant better. That is what makes these cars so fascinating today. By modern standards, they were thirsty, difficult to park, and built with little concern for efficiency. But in their own moment, a long hood, a wide cabin, a quiet ride, and heavy doors were selling points. Big and heavy was not the problem. It was the promise. These land yachts carried personality, comfort, and road presence in a way few modern cars can match. Thanks for watching. Which giant American car would you choose for your dream garage? Write it in the comments and subscribe for more automotive history.